to share a little bit about what the Y means to me. You know, it really became a lifeline for me. Back in 2006, I got a call 2 days before Christmas from a doctor, and I had no idea how much 2 words were going to not just change my life, but change me. He said, the baby boy you're carrying, he's 18 weeks along, and he has Down syndrome. And my world stopped spinning. I couldn't catch my breath. And when I did breathe, the first words out of my mouth were, please let me have an abortion. And my husband was not going to go for that, and it was half his, so my next thought was suicide. And depression moved in, fast and hard. And 9 months went by, and when the nurse laid that little boy in my arms, I felt nothing. And I felt nothing for about 2.5 years. And I did everything I could to run as fast as I could away from anything real. And emotionally, I was unstable and I didn't want my life. And I finally made my way into a therapist's office. And after hours and hours on a green chenille couch and lots of Lexapro, you can laugh, yeah. It works. But I came to realize that James was not the problem. I was. He was not broken, I was. And I had to deal with learning that I was the daughter of an alcoholic and a codependent woman and an artist and an entertainer who lived from the outside in, not from the inside out. And about this time, I went on, I'm sorry, you know, sometimes you get caught up in that moment, you're still there. I was just there, but years went by, honestly. And finally, after a lot of healing, I realized that in order to love my son, I would first have to love myself. And about this time, I got a call from the Y and telling me about the Full Circle program. And we were Y members, and I used to go and I used to actually hide out in the steam room because I could cry in there and nobody could tell. But they said, would you bring James to Full Circle? And reluctantly I did. And internally I was angry. I didn't want him to be a part of this group. And I remember the first time I took him, I dropped him off, and I turned around and I looked at him behind those windows they have. And I was just pissed that he had to be part of this group that at the time I thought were misfits and had no real purpose in this world. And I would leave and I would go to church, Starbucks, and I would sit, and there I would have to admit that the people in that room at the YMCA knew how to love my son better than I did. About this time, I made the decision to get off the road and quit performing. So I was in my closet putting away performance clothes. And I looked out my window. It overlooks our driveway. And I tried to envision myself a couple years down the road, kindergarten time, standing at that end of the driveway with James waiting for the school bus. And when I looked up, what I saw coming down the street was not the regular school bus. It was a short bus. And I hit my knees and I screamed at God. I said, I cannot wrap my head around the fact that I have a special needs child. And what I heard back from the deepest part of my gut was, I'm not asking you to wrap your head around it. I'm asking you to wrap your heart around it. I thought that sounded really poetic of God. But I had no idea how to do that. No idea how to love my own son. Back in therapy, my therapist asked me once, she said, Lynn, what is the big hang-up with you? I said, you know what, I can't think about anything about how horrible his life is going to be. Everything he'll never be, everything he'll never do. That's all I can think about. And she said, but you told me he goes to bed happy and he wakes up happy. Have you ever thought about looking at life through his eyes and not yours? Have you ever thought about now and living in the now? The truth was, I hadn't. And then one day, my dryer broke. And my brother has this great saying, I before E, especially when it involves C. Intellect, before emotion when it involves a crisis. He says you'll make better decisions. So when my dryer broke, I tried to stay calm, and I thought, oh, if my dryer is broke, I get to get a new dryer. I'm going to get the Kelly Ripa Electrolux Deluxe dryer. And I'm going to have the perfect life and the perfect biceps and throw the cookies and the kids are going to catch them and life is going to be wonderful. So I put James in the car and we headed to Sears because they were having a promotional sale. And when I pulled in, there was a band setting up in the parking lot. And I thought, oh God, I've played a lot of crappy polka gigs in my life, but I have never had to play a Sears parking lot in 95-degree heat. We're going to come support them when we're done. So inside I find the sales lady. She shows me the Electrolux Deluxe. She shows me the price. I said, you know what, I'm going to need that I don't do anything but dry clothes dryer. She said, those are over here. So James and I stood in front of this stark white dryer with 2 buttons. And this elderly woman approached me and she said to me, is this your little boy? And I said, yeah. She said, I just buried my little boy. He was 60 years old, and he had Down syndrome. She said, I thought about putting him away, but I didn't. I took care of him his whole life. She said, can I tell you something? I said, yeah. She said, I know how hard it is. I've been there. But I promise you, if you cannot live in the future and let go of that fear and live in this moment right now, you're going to feel more love than you ever imagined. She walks away and, she's standing there and she's crying and I'm crying and I look over, the sales lady's crying. I'm like, okay, this is now the softer side of Sears. As promised, outside we stopped to listen to the band. And I don't know, these people may be here tonight, but the keyboard player comes running straight at me and she says, is this your little boy? And I was crying and I said, yeah. And she said, oh, I have a brother with Down syndrome. He's the love of my life. I know it's hard. I watched my mom. But you know what? Don't live in the future. Let go of your fear. Live in this day right now. You're going to feel more love than you ever imagined. Just then there's a tap on my shoulder. I'm like, this better be Kelly Ripa. There's a third woman. I follow her to her car, and there in her back seat is what appears to be about a 12-year-old little boy. She said, this is our son, Brian. He has a chromosome disorder. She takes my hand and she puts it on Brian's cheek, and she says, Brian, this is a very special mommy who has a beautiful little boy. She takes my hand in hers and she says, I thought about putting him away, but I didn't. I've taken care of him his whole life. He's 52. She said, if I could tell young mothers like you one thing, it would be this. Don't live in the future. Let go of your fear. Live in this moment right now, and you're going to feel more love than you ever imagined. I put James in his car seat, and I sat down in the front seat, and I turned around to back out of that parking spot, and I looked at him, and for the first time in his 4.5 years on this planet, I said, I love you. And I used the rearview mirror to wipe my tears from my face. For the first time, I recognized who I saw. You see, it turned out there were actually 2 people in that car that day with special needs. James was never broken. I was.